So, as those of you guys who follow me on Twitter are aware, I've been spending the last few days trying to find a way to make a video about Doctor Doom that makes sense to do his character justice, because Doctor Doom has been in everything. And so because he's such a difficult character to do, what we're going to do is I'm going to basically give you guys a chronology to a degree of some of the stories he was in. I'm really going to highlight the finer points, but we're also going to get into the discussion about Doctor Doom proper. We're going to look beyond the pages and we're going to get into him as a person to see why it is that Doctor Doom gets involved in the kind of campaigns that he does. So Doctor Doom first appeared in Fantastic Four issue number 5 in 1962, and in the novel Silver Age Art of Comic Books, what we found was that an interview had previously been done with Jack Kirby around 1987 or so, and this interview was cited in this novel whereby Jack Kirby had stated that Doctor Doom was designed the way he was because he was supposed to be indicative of death. He was supposed to look like death, the actual character death, in the sense that he would have a hood over his head, he would have this armor that would take away the humanity and make him look almost inhuman, as if he wasn't of the planet Earth. He was part of some sort of maybe superstitious or mystical realm. In addition, when they were looking for a name for Doctor Doom, they had simply just settled on Doctor Doom. They wanted to create a villain that would be on par and equal to the popularity of the Fantastic Four, and the name Doctor Doom was as menacing as it was simple and elegant. And so what we found with his initial debut is that he simply just arrives at the Baxter Building one day, that he simply goes out to the Fantastic Four, and what he says is the Fantastic Four have to hand over Susan Storm. If they don't hand over Susan Storm, then he's going to attack the rest of New York and destroy the Baxter Building. And so the Fantastic Four really seeing no other option here, given that Doctor Doom has basically disabled their defenses, hand over Susan Storm. And the goal here is to find out what it is that Doctor Doom wants. Now, what Reed Richards does is give us this sort of backstory about Doctor Doom, but we'll get into that here in a minute. But what happens is that Doctor Doom basically takes Susan Storm, uses her as a hostage, and with her as a hostage, then instructs the remainder of the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, and Johnny Storm, that they have to travel into the past in order to capture the jewels of Blackbeard the Pirate. And what this will do, unbeknown to the Fantastic Four, is it will grant Doctor Doom the power he needs to make himself virtually omnipotent and the rule of planet Earth. And so what happens is Reed Richards, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm jump into the past, and when they jump into the past, they of course disguise themselves as pirates, they board Blackbeard's ship, and they successfully manage to acquire the jewels. But the problem here is that Reed Richards begins to realize that if Doctor Doom is pursuing these jewels, then chances are there's something about these jewels that will be used for nefarious purposes. And so what he does is he replaces the jewels with worthless chains and then takes the chest back to the present when he's brought back by Doctor Doom. And so what happens is when Doctor Doom confronts the Fantastic Four, he realizes that the jewels have been replaced with worthless chains. And so as a result, the Fantastic Four together succeed in defeating this version of Doctor Doom. But what they learn is this isn't actually Doctor Doom himself. Instead, this is a Doombot. And this is the first time that we ever actually see Doombots in Marvel Comics, when Doctor Doom himself first appears. Now, the way the Doombots are designed by Doctor Doom, and we actually learn this later on in Marvel Comics, is the Doombots are designed for each one to think it's Doctor Doom, but to follow the orders of the real Doctor Doom. So that if for any reason whatsoever Doctor Doom were to send a Doombot out in his stead to the world as a whole, it would be Doctor Doom itself. It would seem as though he would speak in the same manner of Doctor Doom. He would have the same memories of Doctor Doom. And so to the world, that is Doctor Doom. Now, of course, with this Doombot being destroyed, Doctor Doom himself reveals that this was a Doombot, that he still, I guess, is away from the Fantastic Four. He traps the remainder of the Fantastic Four. He traps Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, and Johnny Storm inside of a room while Susan Storm is still held captive next to Doctor Doom, and then begins to draw the oxygen away so that Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, and Johnny Storm will start to suffocate. And so during this time, what Susan Storm does is she uses her ability to make herself invisible and begins to sneak away. Now, she's successfully able to access a hidden hatch, or a hidden, I guess, opening switch for the door, which allows the remainder of the Fantastic Four to live, but that in the end, he's basically going to try to capture them, try to defeat them, and this will be an ongoing theme with his character. Now, 2 years after his initial introduction in 1964 with Fantastic Four Annual Issue number 2, we get the origin story of Doctor Doom. Now, the way the origin story is given to us is actually quite simple here in a way where it really just wraps things up in a very easy to understand concept. What we learn here with this origin story was that at some point in the past in Latveria, Dr. Doom was the child of a woman named Cynthia Von Doom and a man. And the problem here was that his mother had died at some previous point in time. In this initial origin story, we're not really told how that happens. We're simply just told that she's gone. But we're also informed that she in some manner had been dabbling in the dark arts. And so the possibility existed that Victor Von Doom could inherit her ability to tap into mysticism. What we also know is that among this gypsy tribe that Victor Von Doom lives, that his father is basically the leader of this tribe, and that his father is more or less their medicine man. He's basically their spiritual healer and even their physical healer. And so what we find is that the Baron of Latveria at the time contacts or sends soldiers out for the father of Victor Von Doom in the hopes that Victor Von Doom's father will be able to cure the Baron's wife of some ailment that she has. Now, initially, we're just told that she's sick in this origin story. It's actually not until much later on when we get into the Books of Doom by Ed Brubaker that we learn she actually has cancer. But the fact remains that Victor Von Doom's father is not able to cure this woman. And so as a result, what he does is Victor Von Doom and his father escape Latveria before the Baron can find out that his wife is going to die. And when she actually dies, he sends soldiers after Victor Von Doom and his father. Now, over the course of their attempt to escape, they end up in what I would assume to be maybe the Swiss Alps or maybe Siberia or something like that. But the fact remains that Victor Von Doom's father freezes to death. And so as a result, Victor Von Doom retreats back to Latveria, back to the gypsy camp, whereby enough time has passed so they're no longer being pursued. And then he basically forces himself into the role of being the leader of this gypsy camp. Now, what he also does is he discovers the chest of his mother. And after discovering the chest of his mother, he begins to dabble in science and mysticism. Now, we're not really told why it is that Victor Von Doom is as smart as he is. All we're told is that Victor Von Doom is just extremely smart for his age. And so as a result, he uses his vast intelligence alongside his ability to learn extremely fast, and he basically begins to adapt and to meld science and mysticism into one, which allows him to advance technology among his tribe in a way that was hitherto unseen and even supersedes the powers or the capabilities of the Baron and his forces. And so as a result, he basically begins to wage this sort of one-man war against the Baron by using guerrilla warfare tactics, throwing grenades, different things like that. But ultimately, what we find is that his actions garner the attention of the United States government. And so what happens is a general is sent to Latveria to meet with Victor Von Doom and offers Victor Von Doom the opportunity to travel to the United States to study at Empire State University and to basically further the attempts of the U.S. government and to expand on his own knowledge of science and so on. And so what we find is that when Victor Von Doom travels to Empire State University, he meets Reed Richards, but he also meets Ben Grimm. Now, almost immediately after Reed Richards and Victor Von Doom meet, they become enemies. Not necessarily because Reed Richards has it out for Victor Von Doom, but because at this point, Victor Von Doom is very caught up. He's very arrogant about his intelligence. And so for him, it's really a waste of time for him to spend any time with anybody in that area because they simply can't keep up with him. And so what we find is that Victor Von Doom is attempting to basically access the Netherrealm, what would be referred to as Hell. Now again, in this original origin story, we're not given the basis for that, but what we'll do is we'll actually fill in the gaps as we progress throughout the story of Victor Von Doom. But what happens here is Victor Von Doom, building a machine of sorts, tries to access the Netherrealm, and then the machine simply explodes. And so as a result, Victor Von Doom's face is scarred. And so following this, Victor Von Doom travels to Tibet to basically learn more about science and magic from mystics. He enhances his abilities, and then he travels back to Latveria, which pretty much ends this original origin story in Fantastic Four Annual Issue number 2. Basically, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby telling us this is how we end up with this version of Victor Von Doom. Now, in terms of filling in the gaps here, what we found was that in 1971, with Astonishing Tales issue number 8, written by Roy Thomas and Gary Friedrich, they had simply told us that in some form or another, that Cynthiana Von Doom, the mother of Victor Von Doom, had been dabbling in mysticism and formed a pact with Mephisto. And the goal here was for her to gain enough power to basically overthrow the Baron of Latveria. and to basically give her home, or give a home to the gypsies as a true home for themselves. Now, initially, she didn't really want to make a pact with Mephisto, but Mephisto had basically preyed on her desire to provide a home for her son, her husband, and herself. And so once she gave in to the pact of Mephisto, we found that she had developed, I guess she had been given these abilities, but couldn't control them. And so when she had attacked the Baron of Latveria along with his forces, while she was successful in killing a multitude of soldiers, she was mortally injured in the process. And so as a result, once she traveled back to her home, she died, but she warned her husband to keep Victor Von Doom away from the mystics and the things that she had used in order to achieve the power that she had. Now, in addition to this, we jump to Ed Brubaker's Books of Doom in 2006. And what Ed Brubaker did is he used all these different concepts, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's story of Victor Von Doom, John Byrne's run of Victor Von Doom, which we'll get into. And what he did is he combined all these things into one 6-part origin story that basically made things a whole lot easier here. And what he basically says is that from the time that Victor Von Doom realized that his mother was dead, the time that he was old enough to basically begin using her powers, or using her knowledge and her studies, everything he did existed for the purpose of finding a way to travel to hell to get his mother's soul freed from the clutches of Mephisto. What he tells us is that when he had traveled to Empire State University, when he had developed this machine, that while the world had seemed as though the machine had simply just exploded, for Victor Von Doom, what had happened here is he had penetrated the Netherrealm. He had spoken with Mephisto, and Mephisto had taunted Victor Von Doom and saying that Victor Von Doom's mother will remain in the clutches of Mephisto for eternity. But what he also said is that he'll make a deal with Victor Von Doom. And the deal is Victor Von Doom will be able to fight for his mother's freedom once a year. And that every time Victor Von Doom fails, his people in Latveria will hate him more and more. But Victor Von Doom makes this sacrifice in the hopes that he can free his mother's soul. Now again, this origin story from 2006 really kind of wraps into the Astonishing Tales issue number 8 by Roy Thomas and Gary Friedrich, in that in Astonishing Tales, what we found was that while Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom were fighting, or I guess they were working with one another to free the soul of Doctor Doom's mother, that in the end they're successful and her soul is freed and allowed to go to heaven. But nonetheless, this was the basis behind everything Doctor Doom did in the early days. This is the basis behind everything that he was trying to achieve. Now, what we found was that by 1981, that John Byrne had taken over the role of writing for the Fantastic Four. And John Byrne is considered by all standards of measurement in relation to comic book fans the quintessential Fantastic Four writer in terms of what it was he did for the Fantastic Four as a whole, as well as humanizing Doctor Doom. Now, a lot of the emphasis for John Byrne is given on Doctor Doom. We of course have characters, or I guess writers like Mark Waid. We have Jonathan Hickman, who had fantastic runs with the Fantastic Four, but the fact remains is that John Byrne is usually at the top of the list whenever people talk about Fantastic Four writers. Now, among the things that John Byrne had done, he of course had basically taken Susan Storm and made her a woman as opposed to being referred to as the Invisible Girl. He had given her confidence. He had built her into one of the strongest members of the team. And so this is why we saw that in the 1980s, she had transitioned from the Invisible Girl to the Invisible Woman. But again, the most notable action here of John Byrne was humanizing Doctor Doom, because again, up to this point, Doctor Doom was simply just a villain who basically attacked people. He had his own campaigns, but no one really knew why it was that he was doing these things. He would just show up, he would make life a hassle for people for a little while, and then he would go away. And so what we found was that coming after John Byrne's run of the Fantastic Four, in issue number 293, when John Byrne left, that this humanization of Doctor Doom would carry on in subsequent stories. Now, one of the other more important things when it came to the character of Doctor Doom was the Secret Wars. The Secret Wars, again, much like John Byrne's run of the Fantastic Four, placed Doctor Doom in a whole new light. Now, the Secret Wars were written by Jim Shooter, and this was basically one of the first massive crossover events in Marvel Comics, which is one of the reasons why it's considered the most popular story or the most popular crossover in Marvel Comics, and it's also probably the reason why Marvel is basing their reboot of their continuity off of Secret Wars. But the fact remains here that during the Secret War conflict, of course, as we know, the Beyonder had captured a bunch of superheroes and supervillains. He had put them on the planet on Battleworld and made them fight one another. But almost immediately after Secret War starts, in the very first issue, Doctor Doom's main goal is to capture the power of the Beyonder. Now again, given what we've talked about so far, the basis behind Doctor Doom capturing the power of the Beyonder is to find a way to free his mother's soul, because this again comes before the Doctor Strange and the Doctor Doom team up in 1989. And so what happens here is that Doctor Doom usually, I guess he uses the power of Galactus to steal the power of the Beyonder, and it's very interesting the way he does this. What happens here is that as time progresses, Galactus begins to hunger. He has to satiate his appetite for energy, and so he uses his planet-consuming device to try to consume Battleworld. But as he's about to consume all of this energy, Doctor Doom snatches the energy away from Galactus and puts it within himself, giving him almost unrivaled abilities in terms of everybody else on Battleworld. He then uses the power of Galactus to try to approach the Beyonder, and the Beyonder sends him away, but the Beyonder's curious as to why it was Doctor Doom would attack him in the first place. And so when the Beyonder approaches Doctor Doom in a fleeting moment, Doctor Doom snatches the power of the Beyonder away. Now, he doesn't really use them for nefarious purposes. He doesn't really abuse them here. He just uses them for the purpose of, again, trying to bring his mother's soul back, which is something that he seems to attempt to do once Secret Wars is over. At the very least, that seems to be what his motive would be. But one of the other big things to come out of Secret Wars was that we saw the face of Doctor Doom. This is something we had never seen. The only time we had seen the face of Doctor Doom was before he had received his injury during the explosion when he tried to penetrate the Netherrealm. After that, we never saw what his face looked like. Now, when his face was given to us in Secret Wars, his face was completely pristine. It was completely healed. And this is really one of those big things that belongs to the realm of interpretation. The reason why I say that is because if you look at Jack Kirby's run and Stan Lee's run of the Fantastic Four, they argue that the disfigurement is more of a metaphor. It's more of a depiction of Doctor Doom's self-hatred. His face isn't actually scarred. But when you look at John Byrne's run of the Fantastic Four, John Byrne says that Doctor Doom's face is physically scarred, that it really is scarred that way. Either way, the difference here, I guess the fact remains that when Doctor Doom makes his face known to the superhero community on Battleworld, this is the first time that we see it. Now again, following what it was that Jim Shooter had established with Doctor Doom, the humanization of his character, following John Byrne's expansion on this with Doctor Doom and the Fantastic Four, we saw that going forward throughout the Marvel continuity, Doctor Doom plays a multitude of roles, and he's in almost everything. He's one of the foremost characters that leads to the road of the Scarlet Witch developing insanity, as well as gaining her powers that causes her to lose her mind and then warp reality during the House of M storyline. Doctor Doom, of course, is one of the superheroes, or I guess one of the supervillains, that fights alongside the Avengers and the X-Men and so on, and seems to sacrifice his life in the process during the Onslaught saga and is part of the Heroes Reborn universe. And getting into the current day right now, that is to say what it is that's taking place at the moment in Marvel Comics, it's been revealed to us by Jonathan Hickman that Doctor Doom is Raboom Alal. Now, for me, I actually didn't really see this coming. A lot of people say they have. A lot of people say that they've seen this coming because if you look at the continuity of Doctor Doom is always pulling the strings. Whenever there's a major conflict going on somewhere, Doctor Doom is usually the one that's behind it, or at the very least, is involved in it in some capacity. But what we know here is that somewhere along the line, Doctor Doom was experimenting and trying to understand what was going on with the incursions. And so what he had done is he had met with Owen Reese, with the Molecule Man, and the Molecule Man had taken him to the Beyondverse. And what he did was basically tell Doctor Strange that Doctor Doom, that if Doctor Doom is going to understand what the basis behind the start of the incursions is, he has to travel all the way back to its point of origin. And so what Jonathan Hickman has basically given us here is a paradox. Jonathan Hickman has established that when the incursions initially started, that Doctor Doom had seen an incursion take place. He had captured a shard of the planet Earth that was destroyed by the New Avengers during the initial incursion across Latveria. What he then did was he began to analyze this, this piece of rock, and then in turn he used this piece of rock to find the source in order to travel to it and thereby cause the incursions to happen. That seems to be what it is that Jonathan Hickman is doing here with Doctor Doom, but again, at this moment we're still waiting on a couple more titles from New Avengers before we can actually confirm this, but the fact remains that at this moment right now, we don't really know what's going to happen with Doctor Doom going forward into Secret Wars. We don't know if Doctor Doom will be destroyed. We don't know if Doctor Doom Doom will destroy the Beyonders. We don't know if Doctor Doom will simply continue on and rule over everybody in Battle World. This is simply just an unknown thing here, but the fact remains that given the entire continuity of Doctor Doom, given everything that's happened here, Doctor Doom still stands to this day as one of the most popular, if not the most popular supervillain to have ever existed in the history of Marvel Comics. With that being said, God, that was a mouthful. 20 minutes, that's crazy. That was awesome. I think we did an awesome job with that Doctor Doom video. I think it was great. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this to an end. I know we skipped over a whole bunch of stuff, and what I'll do in the comments section is I'll post a list of some of the best stories involving Doctor Doom. That way you guys can go through and you can look at the ones that seem to pique your interest. And yeah, so I will catch you guys later. Peace. Be sure to follow me on Twitter. There you can keep up with all the updates from Comics Explained and talk to me directly.